Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you for joining us at Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center. We are delighted and excited to celebrate Shabbat with you this evening. Just a bruchim habaim, a blessing of welcome wherever you're coming from, and a little bit of an introduction to this service. This is the first service in a while where we are not experimenting. So I just want to say thanks from the bottom of my heart, not only to everybody who has joined us for that experiment throughout the first 4 Shabbatot of July, but especially to the people who took the time to give us feedback, whether on the surveys we filled out or giving us a call or sending us an email or leaving things in our mailboxes. We learned so much from this. But the most important thing that we learned is the diversity of our congregants' spiritual needs. Mm-hmm. There are those for whom this is a time where we need to stretch, where we need to grow, where we need to sing a song that we've never sung before. And there are those for whom singing the songs that are most familiar are the anchor that we need in this storm. What we commit to you every day, today, and certainly throughout the high holidays is that we are going to do our utmost to make sure you have the most uplifting and comforting spiritual experience that you can have, wherever you are coming from. So tonight you're going to hear some things that are familiar. You're going to hear some things that are perhaps relatively unfamiliar. But the most important thing is that we're going to be doing it together. So thank you for going on this journey with us. And with that, let's get into Shalom Aleichem on page 13.
We'll use the first paragraph and the last paragraph, and we'll lean on the same melody. Shalom Aleichem, Malchei
השרת, מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, הקדוש ברוך הוא, צאתכם לשלום, מלכי השלום, מלכי השלום, מלכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, הקדוש ברוך הוא, יאי רה 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 רה, יאי 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 רה 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 רה, יאי רה רה רה, יאי רה רה רה, It is our custom at this time at PJTC to light our Shabbat candles. If you've got a couple of candles at home and you'd like to join us, please feel free, or point your attention up this way as we increase the light as Shabbat comes upon us.
Let's join together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And in a little while later, I'm going to talk about why we light 2 Shabbat candles. But before then, we're going to start ascending the ladder of the Psalms that are the gift of our ancestors to bring us from this world into the world of Shabbat, starting with Lechuna Ranana on page 15. Page 15.
Lechuna Ranana l'Adonai, Nariya letzur isheinu, nekadma fanav betodah bizmirat nariya lo, ki al gadol Adonai v'lechadol al kol Elohim.
This psalm begins with the word lechu. It is akin to lech lecha, where Abraham, in order to start his mission, has to get up and go to a different place. It's not just let us sing, but let's move and sing, and that's where we will get the most connection.
40 שנה אקוד ודון ואומר עם טועה לבבם הם לא ידעו דרך חיי אשר נשמעתי ורבי אם יבואון אל מנוחתי
שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני, ברכו שמו, מסרו מיום יום ישועתו, ספרו לגויים, כבודו בכל העמים, מפלותיו כי גדול אדוני, ומהולל מאוד, נורא על כל אלוהים החי. די 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 We continue on 17, page 17.
אדוני מלכת על הארץ
The psalm reminds us that God is a righteous judge, and divine justice requires that we, too, practice justice and righteousness in all of our relations with one another.
כל זרו על הצדיק ולישרי לב שמחה שמחו צדיקים באדוני והודו לזכר קודשו שירו לאדוני שיר חדש כי נפלאות עשה הושיע לו ימינו זרוע קודשו.
Sing to Adonai a new song, for God has worked wonders. God's might has been triumphant, revealing supreme power to all. Creation is revealed anew each day. Let's sing a new song each time we're inspired to.
זמרו לאדוני בכינור בכינור בכל שמרה לפני אדוני כי בא לשפוט הארץ ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים במישרים אדוני מלך ירגזו עמים יושב קרובים תנו לארץ. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו רוממו אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
Page 20.
שמו ישתחוו לאדוני ברקודש כל אדוני על המים נכתבורים אדוני על מים רבים כל אדוני בכוח כל אדוני שובר הרזים וישבר אדוני את הזהמנות וישכיבם כמו עגל לבנון וציון כמו בני כל אדוני חוסר לבותי כל אדוני יחיל מבית יחיל אדוני מבקדש כל אדוני יכול אליי ויחשו והוא אלון ובחדו כולו מרכבו אדוני למרו ישב וישב אדוני מלך לעולם אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום
Let's continue together at the bottom of page 20.
ימינך תתיר צרורה קבל רינת עמך סגרנו תרנו נורא
Ana b'koach, gedulat yamincha, please, with the strength of your right hand, God, tatir tzerura, untie our knots. You can take this to mean we're asking God to free those who are held captive in reality or in their own minds, or just to untie the knots that we have inside of us that prevent us from experiencing peace. Before we go to Lecha Dodi, we're asking God to free us from that which we are not free.
אנא בכוח גדולת ימינך תתיר צרורה קבל רינת עמך סגבנו תרנו נורא נא גיבור דורשי איכותך כבבת שמרם, ברכם טהרם, רחמם צדקתך, תמיד גמלם, חסין קדוש, חסין קדוש מרוב תוכה, נהל עדתך. יחיד נאל למענך פנה, זוכרי קדושתך. שבתנו קבל ושמע צעקתנו, יודע תעלומות. ענה בכוח, גדולת ימינך תתיר את צרורה, קבל רינת עמך סגרנו, תארנו נורא, תארנו נורא.
We now turn to page 21 to welcome in Shabbat as an honored guest, as a beloved queen, Lecha Dodi, come my beloved, page 21.
New-ish melody. Let's join together on the first part of the Chadodi, and then we'll continue with a more known one for us PJTC members.
Lecha Dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
שמור וזכור ודיבור אחד, ישמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה.
lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
לקראת שבת לכו אליך, כי בכל וברכה, מראש מניירת המשוכה, סוף מעשה מחשבה תחילה.
lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
מקדש מלכים ומלוכה, קומי צעים מתוך ההפכה, רולת שרת בעמק הבכה, והוא יחמוד הלילה.
lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
התנערי מעפר יקומי, לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי, היד הנשי וגל לחמי, כל מהר נפשי גאה.
lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. lecha dodi, לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך ומיורי, ורי ורי שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני
לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוסי את אדוני תריצי על ידיש בן פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה הולך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. הולך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובתולה. תוך אמוני הסגולה בואי חלה הולך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. הולך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. הולך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. הולך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת
We conclude Kabbalat Shabbat with a special psalm written just for Shabbat, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat on page 23.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך העליון, לזמר לשמך העליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך העליון, לזמר לשמך העליון.
להגיד בבוקר חסדך באמונתך בלילות, עלי הצורר ועלי דבל, עלי היגיון ותינור.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך העליון, לזמר לשמך העליון.
כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך, במעשה ידיך ארנן.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך העליון, לזמר לשמך העליון.
מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך.
מושיע ליום השבת. טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך העליון, לזמר לשמך העליון,
ולזמר לשמך
Good Shabbos, everybody, and thanks again for joining us at Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center. I said that kind of like we were done, but that's not what I mean. I'm glad that you're here, right in the middle, especially if you're just joining us. So, before we continue with our Mariv evening prayers, I want to teach a few words of Torah here. This is a textually action-packed parsha, if I can say that. Action-packed. It's like if there was a graphic novel of Jewish theology, it would be all about Parshat Et Hanan. But there's not, so we'll just have to do the best we can. What I love most about this Parsha, I say that about a lot of Parshas, but this one is special because it's known as Shabbat Nachamu. And you might translate it as the Shabbat of comfort. But really, Nachamu is an imperative verb. It's named after the beginning of the Haftarah. We just came off of 3 weeks of what's known as the Haftarot of admonition or rebuke, the Haftarot of, right, that concludes with Tisha B'Av, this past Wednesday night, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. But after taking kind of a beating for 3 weeks, after having the prophets tell us what terrible people we are capable of being and what terrible consequences we'll have for that, culminating with a history lesson about all the worst things that have happened to us in the last 4,000 years, we then enter a new period of comfort, of God's starting with soothing us as we begin the 7-week journey toward Rosh Hashanah, toward the celebration of the new year and the opportunity for a new you. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, Yomar Elohechem. Be comforted, my people, says your God. Now, in addition to this great Haftarah, we have what I'll say are some of the greatest hits of the Torah. In this Parsha, we have the Shema and the V'ahavta. Right? These weren't prayers that were made up out of thin air. These are quotations from this Parsha that we say every time we pray together. That we should listen, that we should love, and that we should pass these words on to our children. This Parsha. We also have a retelling of the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments appear twice in the Torah, and this week is when it happens, half of it. So that's exciting. And from that retelling comes the reason we have 2 Shabbat candles. You know, I get this question, like, why do we have 2 Shabbat candles? And some say, well, this is for the mommy in the house, and this is for the daddy in the house, and you know, that works for some people. I think it's, you know, terribly heteronormative. But if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, a source about 400 years old, give or take, it says when you should light candles, ideally, or a lamp. It said lamp. You know, I think lamps were more popular back then, frankly, because they were more sustainable. They were cheaper. Candles were expensive, but if you had an oil lamp, you put a little oil in there and 2 wicks, you got lights. But it says you should, if you can't even afford Kiddush, if you have to make a choice between lights and Kiddush, do the lights. Right? Even if you can't afford 2 wicks, do 1. But if you can, do 2. And in the Shulchan Aruch and the order Orach Chaim, number 263, paragraph 1, says we light 2 because of the 2 retellings of the 10 Commandments. Because the first time we get the 10 Commandments, kind of a big deal, it says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kodsho. Remember or commemorate Shabbat for its holiness. And this week, it says, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat l'kodsho. Almost the same sentence, very different verb. Guard. Some say observe. My favorite translation, protect the Sabbath day for its holiness. This is where we get all the don'ts of Shabbat, by the way. Not because we need our lives to be harder, but because in order to observe Shabbat, we need to build a fence around it. We need to set things aside so that we can truly luxuriate in our rest without being interrupted. But both of these ideals are important. We need to commemorate. We need to tell people this is important. We need to tell our children. We need to tell our parents sometimes. Put your phone down. I know I've been told that a couple of times this week. And it's so important that we preserve both of these ideas. Yosef Karo tells us in the Shulchan Aruch, light 2 Shabbat candles. I'm going to get back to the idea for just a second of consolation, of comfort. Earlier this week, as I said, I wouldn't say we celebrated Tisha B'Av. You don't really celebrate Tisha B'Av. This was the day that both of our temples were destroyed, a number of horrible events in the Shoah, as well as the Crusades, and throughout our history. We honor Tisha B'Av. And on it, the rabbi said, this is such a sad occasion, you're not allowed to study Torah all day. And they said, come on, we're rabbis. They say, okay, you can read one book of the Torah, Echa, Lamentations. But just that one. And that's why we read Lamentations on Erev Tisha B'Av. And the first line of Lamentations, of Echa, is, alas, lonely is our city. That's the worst thing you could say. That is the saddest thing that you could use to describe the situation of destruction, is loneliness. Loneliness was the first, let's say, boo-boo in the creation of the world. 6 days, there was land, it was good. There were stars, it was good. There were animals, it was good. There were people, it was very good. It's not good for man to be alone. There are some traditions that honor isolation, where the pinnacle of spiritual achievement comes from isolating oneself in a monastery or a mountaintop or a cave so that you can dispense with the needs of the body, divorce yourself from the temptations of your fellow humanity, and only in the ultimate loneliness can you achieve enlightenment. Here's how that went for a couple of guys named Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar, presumably Ben Shimon. They made a mistake, and they were rabbis who were teaching under the Roman Empire, and they were less than praising of the Roman occupation of Jerusalem, and they got a death sentence out of it. And so to beat that rap, they hid in the Beit Midrash, and they studied Torah all day long. And they had one person coming to bring their food and water, but they reasoned that, if we have somebody coming in from the outside, they're going to talk, somebody's going to find us out. So, capital idea, let's go to a cave. And it says, and this is you can read this whole story, sometimes with pictures, in Masechet Shabbat, page 33, side B. So they go to this cave. This is one of my favorite cave stories. They go to this cave, and it says they want to study Torah all day, and they want to pray, and that's all they're going to do. But they don't want to get their clothes dirty because they want to look nice when it's time to pray. So they take all their clothes, they fold them and they put them in the corner, and inside this cave, they bury themselves up to their necks and sit there, two heads sticking out of the sand, studying Torah. I don't know who turned the page, but maybe they were using scrolls back then. And then when it was time to pray, they would get out of the hole, they would put their clothes back on, pray, take their clothes off, get back in the hole, and study Torah. And they didn't have anybody bringing them food. It says a great miracle occurred, and a carob tree grew inside this cave. And a spring of water started bubbling up. So they had food, they had water, they had Torah, they had praying, they had each other, and nothing else. And they lived this way for years. And then it says the prophet Elijah appears outside the cave and says, hey, the emperor that actually made them wanted men has died. The decree is averted. Who's going to tell them? So somebody knocks on the cave door and says, you're free to go. These guys come out of the cave. And it says the first thing they saw, once their eyes adjusted to the light, was a man plowing his field. And their first response to this was rage. Because they'd been immersed in Torah study for years, all by themselves. They didn't know that there was any other worthy activity. They'd been fed by a magic tree and a brook. And so their thought was, how dare this person waste his time not studying Torah? And their rage was so fierce that they got like Superman eyes, and their hatred came out of their face, and everything they looked at caught on fire. I'm just reporting the Torah. I didn't see this myself, the Talmud rather. But it says in the Talmud that a voice came from heaven and said, did all that studying make you hate my world so much that you wanted to destroy it? Get back in your cave. So they did. They got back in the cave. And they asked themselves, how long must we stay here until we are cured of this zeal that becomes destructive rage? And they reasoned that, well, no soul stays in Gehinnom longer than 12 months. That's why we say Kaddish for our parents for 11, by the way. And after 12 months, they came out of the cave. And they'd learned their lesson. They still weren't fully adjusted. It said that the son, the younger man, and this often happens, was very critical of everything that he saw. Didn't do the lightning eyes, but he was very critical. Everything that Eleazar struck, his father Shimon healed. And one day, on Friday afternoon, they're there, they're reacclimating to the world from their isolation, and they see a man running down the street with two branches of myrtle, and they could smell it because myrtle is very fragrant. And they say, hey, what are you doing with that myrtle? Maybe that's the new fashion. We haven't been out of a cave in years. And he says, I've got these for Shabbos because they smell good, they make my whole house smell good, and they really uplift my Shabbos experience. I know it's not in the Torah, but this is how we do Shabbos. And immediately they go back to their place of being judgmental rabbis, and they say, why don't you just have one? And this Stam Yid, this Am Haaretz says, this one is for Zachor, and this one is for Shamor. They spent years in isolation trying to figure out what God wanted of them. And this one man of the world made Shabbat with two branches of a tree. But he knew his 10 Commandments, he knew his Torah, and he knew the right way. No cave involved. At this point, Rabbi Shimon says, This is how dear the mitzvot are to Israel. And the Talmud says, their minds were put at ease. They were comforted. The great thing about Tisha B'Av, if I could say that, is it gives us a place to put our grief. It gives us a vessel to put our foreboding for the future so that we can begin to walk up the mountain toward Rosh Hashanah, so that with hope and comfort we can prepare for a new year. I know for many this is a place and a time of isolation, but learn from these rabbis, don't let your isolation embitter you. Don't let your anger ruin what you long to embrace. When you are free to, look out and see all the good that people are doing in the world today, doing the best with what they have. Be comforted. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Be comforted, people. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to continue on page 28 with our call to prayer, the Baruch Hu. Please rise if you're able.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Adonai ומעביר יום ומהביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה. אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני,
Baruch Shemo.
אמרי ורבי.
Amen. You may be seated. Let's continue on page 29 with Ahavat Olam, the constancy of God's love.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת עמך אהבת תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת אותנו לימדת על כן אדוני אלוהינו והשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח ובחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובכם נגע יומם ולילה נגע יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל אוהב עמו ישראל.
Amen.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, והם שמעתי של מצוות השם.
Continue with the second passage at your own pace, and we'll get back together in just a moment. Let's join together at the top of page 31. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael, ve'amarta lehem, vasu lehem tzitzit, al kanfei vigdehem ledorotam, venatnu al tzitzit hakanaf, petil techelet, vehaya lachem, letzitzit, uritem oto, uzkartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, vasitem otam, velo taturu, acharei lebavchem, ve'acharei lehem, asher atem zonim acharechem, leman tizkeru, vasitem et kol mitzvotai, vitem kedoshim lelohehem, ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lechem lelohim, ani
אדוני אלוהיכם,
Adonai Elohechem emet.
אמת אמונה כל זאת תקיים עלינו, כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואנו זולתו.
We're on page 32, page 32.
Let's join together in the middle of the page with Mi Chamocha.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי
כמוך נעדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נעדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה.
מלכות אחר ובניך, בוקר הים לפני משה ומרים. זה לי, זה לי, אנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך, לעולם ונאמן כיפד אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני
Baruch Shemo.
גל ישראל
Amen. Let's join together on page 33 for Hashkivenu. Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace and awaken us again, our sovereign, in peace.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ushmor et tzeiteinu u'oreinu lechaim u'shalom ve'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu malkeinu lechaim. Shalom, 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 shalom. Baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
Amen. Page 34, page 34.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביי 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 ביני ובין בני ישראל עוד היא לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש.
Please rise as we join together for the Chatzi Kaddish, which will be followed by the Amidah in your own place at your own pace on page 35b. We'll start on page 34. Please rise.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמר רבה
Amen.
בעלמא דברך חידותה וימליך מלכותה
בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך
לעולם עולמי עלמיה, יתברך.
יתמרח וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה לשמי דקדשה
בריחו
לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה
תושבחתה ונחמתה דהמירן בעלמא
וימרו.
אמן.
היא הוא לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי אמן. עושה שלום, שלום במרותיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ולכל יושבי תבל. עושה שלום, שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. ועל כל יושבי תבל
We conclude the Amidah with the Kaddish Shalem on page 48. Page 48.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
וילמד וירחרת וימליך מלכותה וחי יכונו וימיכונו וחי תכל בית ישראל. בגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו.
Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Ve'olam Olamei Almaya, Yitbarach,
יתברך וישתבח ויתברר ויתנשא ויתהדר וידלב דל שמי נקודשה.
Rihu.
לאל אמין כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמה וימרו.
Amen.
תתקבל צלות ולמות לכל ישראל קודם אבוהון דבשמיא וימרו.
Amen.
יהי שלום רע משמיא וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל וימרו.
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל וימרו.
Amen. Please rise for Elenu on page 51. Page 51, please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. על כן נקווה לך אדוני אלוהינו להיות מלך. כי המלכות שלך היא, ולעולמי תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב את תורתך, אדוני ימלוך, לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. You may be seated. This is a time in our service where we remember those who are no longer with us. In the coming week, we're marking the yahrzeit of Benjamin Friedman, Betty Case, Jacob Miller, Anna Susskind, Carol Myers, Madeline Glazo, Morris Waprinsky, Frida Mandel, Joseph Goodstein, Grace Epstein, Sylvia Cooper, Henry Greenberg, Sarah Rappaport, John Gorfinkel, Philip George Friend, Mickey Benedict, Louis Kittiver, Thomas McGrath, Bertha Orenstein, Sophie Hassman, Oscar Suskind, Violet Dorfman, Henrietta Holzer, Julius Blitz, Eugene Kahn, Grace Schiffman, Allison Heath, Rose Lipser, Philip Safman, Lynn Susan Shashadri, Harold Karsh, Herman Lane, Raymond Walter, and Esther Vigo. We mourn the loss also of Ellis Seligman, Dr. Ellis Seligman, who passed away on Sunday, July 19th, and we mourn the loss of Zena Phillips, beloved mother of Shannon Phillips, Merritt Weiss, and Carla Russing. Zena passed away on Sunday, July 25th. She was a longtime member of PJTC who served as sisterhood president, teacher in the religious school, and PJTC librarian. We pray that Zena's and Ellis's memory be for a blessing. Hamakom Yenachem, may God comfort and strengthen their families at this time. If you're in mourning for any of these people or have a yahrzeit, or if there's anybody on your mind that you're in mourning for and you want to lift up their name in honor, please rise and join me on page 52 for the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Amen.
Balma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mivorach Leolam Lomei Almaya. Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Vitpa'ar, Vitramam, Vitnaseh, Vitadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shmei Dekudsha, Brihu, Leila Min Kol Birchata Vashirata, Tushbechata V'nechemata, Damiran Bialma Vimru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, Vimru, Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Val Kol Yisrael, Vimru, Amen. You may be seated for just a few brief announcements. There's things that happen here every single week that I'm not going to give a lot of details because you can read them in our email. I want to just let you know we do have a sing-along Shabbat every Friday. We have multiple meditation groups throughout the week. We have an ongoing Exploring Your Life Through Torah class with Rabbi Jason Mann on Thursdays. A couple of new things that I want to make sure are on your radar. This week, the PJTC Social Hall is hosted by the Men's Club, featuring speaker Louis Friedman, co-founder and former executive director of the Planetary Society and former Mars program leader at JPL. There's been a bit of Mars-like robot-y stuff that's been happening this week that was pretty exciting. Some people woke up for that, not because of the earthquake on Wednesday.
I didn't feel the earthquake at all. Don't know.
People told me about it. I was woken up by the people who were woken up. That's happening this Thursday in our social hall. You should also know that the Melton School of Adult Jewish Learning has a 2-week session, this is a new thing, Through the Lens of Jews, an American Story with Joellen Zolman. That begins Wednesday, August 5th at 10 a.m. Lots of great stuff going on here. Please check your weekly e-blast for links and more information for all of those things. Stay home, stay healthy. Thank you for joining us at PJTC. So how about you help us sing our way out of here? Please rise and then stick around for Kiddush, okay?
Let's join together. Please rise.
Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kulam. Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, Shalom. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, ve'al kulam. Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, Odivo Shalom Aleinu, ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, Shalom.